Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Wildfire by Ashley A. Quinn, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. The hot late June sun beat down on Tara Miller's neck as she worked on her ancient truck. She knew she should just drive the fancy SUV parked in her garage, but there was something about driving the old Ford that calmed her soul. Life was busy, and the truck made her think of simpler times, when life wasn't so complicated or painful. Her hand slipped off the wrench she used to tighten the bolt on the air filter, and she banged her knuckles on the engine mount. Fuck! She snatched her hand back and cradled it between her breasts. Straightening, she turned away from the vehicle and looked out over her family's ranch, the Broken Bow. Golden prairie grass waved in the light breeze, birds chirped, and cows mooed. Nestled against the mountain, the ranch had been in her family since the 1860s. She and all her siblings still lived on it. Some of them, like herself, had left and come back, but they always found their way home again. She took her aching hand, then swiped at the sweat rolling down her face with the blue bandana tucked in her shorts pocket. It was hot. Summer had come early this year and hadn't let up. A red truck with a motorcycle strapped into the bed rolled up the drive, catching her attention. She narrowed her eyes and watched as it made its way to her brother Seb's house. Great, Jace is here. The truck pulled up to the house and stopped. The driver's door opened and long denim-clad legs emerged to drop to the ground, followed by a narrow waist, broad chest, thick arms, a face to die for, and a head of golden hair that begged her to run her fingers through it. Heat rushed south to flood Tara's core. Why did Jace Travers have to be so damn sexy? And why did her brother think it was a good idea to let the man stay in his house until he found a place of his own? Shaking her hand again, she turned back to her truck, determined to ignore him and his sexiness. She would just pretend he wasn't 100 yards away. She glanced up. Muscles bulged as he lowered the tailgate and hopped up into the truck bed to undo the straps holding the motorcycle in place. He bent over with his back to her, and she dropped her wrench at the sight of that tight butt encased in even tighter denim. It clanged through the engine to drop to the stones below. He looked up at the racket. She ducked her head and prayed he wouldn't come over to see if she needed help. Tara counted to 30 and chanced another glimpse across the grass. He had mounted the bike and was walking it backward down a metal ramp. Relieved, she crouched down to retrieve the tool she dropped. It had fallen farther back than she thought. Lying down, she scooted on her belly under the vehicle and stretched. Her fingers closed around the cool metal, and she shimmied her way back out. As she cleared the bumper, she rolled to sit up and found herself looking at a pair of long, jean-covered legs. She followed them up over strong thighs, a very intriguing bulge, a flat stomach, and a well-built chest to a face so handsome it should only be seen on a movie screen. He arched one perfect golden eyebrow at her, and a corner of his mouth quirked. The breeze ruffled his honeyed hair, and those deep blue eyes carried a spark of humor as he stared down at her. "You need some help?" And that voice. It rolled over her like fine wine, so smooth and rich, but with a bite. She cleared her throat and stood, waving away the hand he offered. "No, I just dropped my wrench." She held up the offending tool. He gave a slow nod, then looked at the teal Ford. "Car trouble?" She shook her head and blew a piece of hair out of her eyes that had come loose from her ponytail. "Just routine maintenance." "Like an oil change?" She nodded. "Among other things." "You know how to do all that? I thought you were a chef." "I grew up on a ranch. I can take apart the tractor and rebuild the engine in the middle of the pasture if I have to." "With just dental floss and a hairpin?" He flashed a teasing grin. She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms, tapping her foot and ignoring the MacGyver reference, no matter how accurate or funny it was. "Did you have a reason for coming over here, or did you just feel like bugging me?" His smile faded, and she thought she saw a flash of hurt in his eyes. Her conscience niggled at her, but she shoved it back into its box. He was dangerous to her sanity and needed to leave. He held up his hands. "Just thought you might need a hand. My mistake." He backed away. "See you around, Tara." With a brief wave, he turned and jogged back to Seb's house. Tara turned back to her truck and tried not to watch that perfect ass of his flex as he ran. Focusing on the air filter, she tightened the cover and lowered the hood. It closed with a bang, and she tossed her wrench into the toolbox on the ground. Scooping it up, she walked into her garage and deposited it on the workbench before going inside, stripping off her clothes and stuffing them straight into the washer. Naked, she walked to her bathroom and turned on the shower. She might be a grease monkey, but that didn't mean she wanted to smell or look like one. After a brief shower, she dressed in a pair of mint green capris, a sleeveless white blouse, and brown leather sandals, then headed outside to her truck. She had time for a quick trip into town before she had to be at the restaurant to prepare for dinner. She needed a latte and a dose of Macy's craziness to banish the image of Jace Travers from her brain. Windows rolled down, she savored the breeze as she drove the 10 miles to town, letting it wash away some of the tension. She needed to find a way to cope with his presence, since he would be her next-door neighbor for the next few weeks at least. It wasn't that she didn't like him, she liked him too much. The man was sex on a stick, and he was nice. Any single woman in her right mind would love to have him hanging around. But she had sworn off adrenaline junkies and men who looked like they could break her heart. She'd had enough heartache. That old familiar pang stabbed her in the chest as she remembered her husband, as she took a steadying breath. No, she never wanted another man like that again. She couldn't handle it. She cruised into Silver Gap and headed straight for Peppy Brewster, Macy's coffee shop. She tucked her vintage truck between two SUVs and shut off the engine. Yikes! A peek in the mirror revealed the wind did a number on her hair. At least it was dry now. She scraped it up into a messy bun and stepped out of the vehicle. Inside the shop, the scent of fresh coffee assailed her. She took a deep breath of the heavenly smell. "Hey girl, what brings you to town?" Tara smiled at Macy and walked up to the counter. "I needed a latte before work and to clear my head." Jace arrived. Macy's grin was wicked. "Ooh, yum. That man is so hot." She grabbed the filter for the espresso machine and packed it full of coffee grounds, then affixed it to the machine. "You want your usual?" "Yeah, but iced, and hot or not, he still irritates me." Macy giggled and scooped some ice into a plastic cup and poured milk over it. "Yeah, because he gets you all hot and bothered. Would it hurt to give in to that? It might lighten you up a bit and get you to relax." "I don't have time to relax." Her phone dinged and she opened her purse. It better not be her old editor again. He kept calling, but she'd yet to listen to his messages, read his texts, or call him back. She wasn't interested in that life anymore. Finding her phone, she turned on the screen to see a message from her assistant manager, Cassie, groaning as she read it. Her produce shipment was late. "Case in point," she sighed and showed the message to Macy. "I have to go straighten out this mess now and hope I have enough stuff to come up with something for the menu." "Go talk to Raina. See what she's got that might tide you over for today." She dumped the 2 shots of espresso into the milk and gave it a stir. Tara's face brightened. "Hey, that's a good idea." Macy smiled and stuck a lid on the drink, then handed it to Tara. "Duh." She flipped her hair and batted her eyes. Tara laughed. "Thank you. I can always count on you to turn my mood around." She passed her friend her credit card and took a sip. "And this," she moaned in delight. "I can always count on this, too. Don't know how you do it. Mine never turn out this good." She had an espresso machine at the restaurant, but her lattes never tasted as good as Macy's. Macy shrugged and handed her back her card and a receipt. "Magic." "Sure." She narrowed her eyes at her friend. "One day you're going to tell me where you get your coffee beans." "Trade secret." She leaned on the counter and grinned. Tara tipped her cup toward Macy as she backed away. "One day." Macy laughed. Tara grinned. "Thanks for the tip about Raina. I'll drive out there now." "Sure, I hope she has some things left for you to use. Her farm market's been going gangbusters lately. That greenhouse she put up has already paid for itself." No kidding. Raina was one of the few locals who grew vegetables year-round, and she was the only one who grew on such a large scale. Tara waved and left the cafe. Hopping back into her truck, she backed out of her space and headed toward the ranch. Raina's family owned the property that bordered the Broken Bow to the east. They ran cattle, but Raina had also turned a section of the ranch into a profitable vegetable and herb farm. Tara just wished it was bigger. She would buy all her fresh produce from the Neiderts if she could. but Raina ran that part of the ranch alone, and what she cultivated was as much as she could handle. The breeze blew through the cab, and she sang along to the radio in a much better mindset than when she left her house. She knew it wouldn't take much. She just needed a good laugh. And coffee. She picked up her cup and took another drink. No more Golden Boy clogging up her mind. Thanks to Macy's Magic Latte and the frantic text from her assistant, she could focus now and switch gears to plan a new menu for tonight. Thankfully, her meat delivery had arrived. She just had to worry about sides. Raina's greenhouse grew food all year, so if she had any produce left after today's market, she would have some decent choices. She passed the entrance for the Broken Bow and continued down the highway another 3 miles before she reached the turnoff to the Neidert's ranch, the Double Moon. Bumping down the dirt road, she headed for the greenhouse where Raina's SUV sat outside. As she pulled to a stop, Raina came out to greet her. "Hey, Macy called and said you needed a hand." Tara stepped out of her truck and shut the door. "Yeah, I ran into a minor snag. My produce delivery didn't arrive. I need whatever you got." Raina blew out a breath and swept a hand over her hair and down her ponytail. "That's not much, but come on in and take a look." Tara followed her inside to a set of tables laden with crates. She peered over the edge of the first few, then looked up at her friend. "Wow, I'm both happy and sad. Happy for you, but sad that I'm going to run out of side dishes tonight. I do have some other things I haven't harvested. They're on the edge of ripe, so I was going to pick them for tomorrow's market. Don't worry, we'll get you enough to hold you. Grab a crate." She pointed to a stack of empties on the floor. They walked down the aisles of plants, and soon Tara had enough produce to last the night. She loaded the last crate into her truck and shut the tailgate. "Thank you so much. I will cut you a check once I get back to the restaurant." Raina shrugged. "I know you're good for it, and you've saved me from hauling all this to market tomorrow. I don't mind a slow day." She leaned against the side of the truck and sent a coy smile at Tara. "So, Macy also said you had a run-in with a certain hunky detective." Tara rolled her eyes and groaned. "It was nothing. He moved into Seb's house today. We said hello." She waggled her eyebrows. "Really? Is that all that happened?" The image of his butt and those jeans popped into her head. "Yes." Raina pushed her tongue into her cheek. "Uh-huh. Okay. What do you want me to say? He came over and said hello, and then he left. As far as I'm concerned, he can stay away." An eye roll was Raina's response. "Oh, come on. You know you find that man attractive." "Of course I do. Have you seen him? But I'm not ready for a relationship, especially not with a man who rides a motorcycle and looks like the sun god himself. Those are the best kind of men. And Tara, it's been 3 years since Sean died." "There's no timeline on grief, Raina." Raina straightened and moved closer to lay a hand on Tara's arm. "I know that, sweetie, but you aren't grieving. You aren't even really living." Tara glanced away, her mouth set in a firm line. "What are you talking about? Of course I'm living. I opened my restaurant." Raina shook her head. "No, that's a distraction, and it keeps you from thinking about things, from feeling." Tara shifted, uncomfortable with the turn in the conversation. She wanted to say Raina was wrong, but deep down she knew her friend was right. But it was easier to stay busy and stuff her feelings down where they would never see the light of day than to deal with them. She shrugged and opened the truck door. "Yeah, well, it's how I deal. Look, I need to get going. Thanks for helping me out." Raina sighed and nodded. "Anytime. Remember what I said, though. Think about it at least." Tara nodded and climbed inside. The door closed with a creak. She had no intention of doing any such thing. That particular can of worms could stay right where it was, but she offered Raina a genuine smile. "Have I told you lately how much I appreciate you? Thank you for looking out for me." The other woman beamed. "You're welcome. Now, go. Make something delicious." Tara pulled away with a wave. Damn it. She picked up the now tepid latte and took a sip. Its magic was gone, though. But it wasn't thoughts of Jace that wouldn't leave her mind now. It was thoughts of another man who was never coming back.